welcome to an all-new episode of Hala Kuwait. I'm Rita Abdo and I'll be your host for this evening. And dear viewers, as usual, our team has lined up informative reports and interview segments. In the beginning of our show, I would like to highlight that the chance of catching COVID-19 is still there. So please stay safe and maintain social distancing and wearing medical masks, as well as only listening to health-related information from reliable sources only, especially with regards to the vaccination. To start off, let's view a report on International Day of Education.
دكتور فهد الحلبي، الحمد لله تم التطعيم.
I just got vaccine.
I got my vaccine today.
الحمد لله تم التطعيم. معاكم دكتور أحمد عبد الرحمن ملا.
تم التطعيم دكتور فيصل حامد الشلفان.
الحمد لله تم التطعيم دكتور عبد الله اسماعيل البنا.
تم التطعيم دكتورة شيماء القطان.
تم التطعيم دكتور محمد عبد الغفار.
تم التطعيم
تم التطعيم فهد العنية شيخ الكندري.
تم التطعيم خالد السبيعي.
تم التطعيم سليمان الطرموم.
تم التطعيم دكتور عبد الرحمن مطلق.
I got the vaccine.
تم التطعيم. تم التطعيم.
تم التطعيم.
تم التطعيم.
تم التطعيم.
تم التطعيم.
أخذت التطعيم.
تم التطعيم.
تم التطعيم.
تم التطعيم.
تم التطعيم.
تم التطعيم.
تم التطعيم.
إصابة شخص بفيروس كورونا ثم انقل إلى عدد كبير من الأشخاص، وبفضل من الله جميعهم تعافوا. هل هذا يقلل من خطورة الفيروس والتهاون بالاشتراطات الصحية؟ لا. ليش؟ خطورة الفيروس تفرق من شخص إلى آخر. كبار السن وأصحاب الأمراض المزمنة والكثير من الحالات يتم شفائهم بعد عناء. يومياً هنالك حالات وفاة نفقد فيها أحبتنا بسبب عدم التزام البعض من خلال تجمع الأعراس والدواوين وغيرها من المناسبات اللي بسببها يتفشى الفيروس بالمجتمع بشكل كبير. تعاون وعدم التهاون لوقف انتشار الفيروس علشان ما نفقد أحبتنا.
الخطوة الأولى لتلقي تطعيم كوفيد-19 تبدأ بالتسجيل عبر الرابط الموجود في الموقع الرسمي لوزارة الصحة. بعد الإتمام تسجيل البيانات سوف تصل رسالة نصية عبر الهاتف، وفي هذه الرسالة موعد تطعيم الجرعة الأولى من لقاح كوفيد-19. وفي هذه الرسالة كذلك سوف يكون هناك QR كود رمز التحقق لاستخدامه عند الوصول. فور الوصول لمركز الكويت لتطعيم كوفيد-19 سوف تقوم بإبراز الرسالة النصية اللي وصلت لك واللي فيها موعد التطعيم حتى يتم التحقق من البيانات والتحقق من رمز QR كود، وبعد ذلك يتم توجيهك لغرفة التطعيم. بعد التحقق من البيانات والمعلومات عند الاستقبال ومن QR كود سوف يتم الإرشاد إلى غرفة التطعيم، يتواجد فيها عدد 2 من زملائنا من الهيئة التمريضية، واحد لأخذ البيانات والمعلومات من المراجع الكريم، والآخر هو لإعطاء جرعة التطعيم. بعد التطعيم هناك منطقة للاستراحة ولمدة 15 دقيقة. في هذا الأثناء سوف تصل رسالة عبر الهاتف فيها موعد وتاريخ الجرعة الثانية من تطعيم كوفيد-19. كذلك سوف يتم تزويدك برابط، في هذا الرابط سوف يتم توثيق أي أعراض جانبية لا قدر الله فيما لو طرأت، حتى يتم التواصل مع حضراتكم من قبل المختصين من وزارة الصحة. حاليا احنا في غرفة الملاحظة في مركز الكويت لتطعيم كوفيد-19. هذه الغرفة مجهزة بالأجهزة والأدوات اللازمة التي قد نحتاجها فيما لو دعت الحاجة لا قدر الله، وذلك لضمان تقديم أفضل الخدمات الطبية اللازمة وفق الجودة المطلوبة.
من الله وتوفيقه ندشن اليوم حملة التطعيم. أود أن أؤكد بأن لقاح فايزر اللي راح نبتدي فيه التطعيم تم أخذه عبر العالم 2,100,000، وهو لقاح آمن ومعتمد من الجهات الدولية. نسأل الله العلي القدير أن يزيل هذه الجائحة عن الكويت وعن العالم بأسرع وقت. يجب الالتزام بالإرشادات الصحية، الكمام والتباعد وغسل الأيدي، حتى نضمن إن شاء الله أن نستمر على ما كنا مواجهينه منذ بداية هذه السنة.
Dear viewers, we have been joined by our first guest for this evening, UNESCO representative in the Arab state of the Gulf and Yemen and Director of UNESCO Doha office, Dr. Anna Paolini. Good evening, Dr. Anna.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. It's our pleasure. So we're going to be talking about the Education Day today, yes?
Absolutely. Great celebration.
Yes, of course, it's a really important day. So to begin, as we know that the United Nations General Assembly proclaimed the 24th of January as the International Day of Education, why was this year's theme titled Recover and Revitalize Education for the COVID-19 Generation?
Well, the title is very appropriate in the present context of pandemic,
yes.
And it really means prioritizing education in the recovery, investing and building inclusive systems that are more resilient to future shock, and can also build a more sustainable and safer future. It also called to all the countries, and especially those who have signed the Global Education Meeting Declaration that was endorsed by 70 countries, during the past year, to deliver on their commitment and remind them that they have to protect education financing and they have to outline measures to safeguard education. It is also a response. Of course, this is a national, international day that we celebrate every year, the same date. This year, the global event will be launched tomorrow, as it is Sunday in most of the countries, so it's a day off. But and if you think a year ago, we were not even thinking that we would be in the present pandemic situation.
Of course,
so this day and this title really reminds us that the top priority must be placed on keeping the school open and the reopening of them as early as possible, taking measures to protect, of course, always the health and the well-being of the learners, but as well of the teacher and the educator. So it's also, we have seen that hybrid solution, mixed solution, long distance learning and in class can help young people really to maintain some physical connection, because it's not only about knowledge, but it's also about connections with school peers, with the teachers, and simultaneously mitigating the risk that also, a spike in COVID infection. I mean, this blending system of education is very useful before that we can go back to a normal, completely reopening of schools.
Yes, Dr. Anna, as you said, none of us thought that the schools and the education system would change this much due to COVID-19. So how badly did the pandemic of COVID-19 affect education worldwide? We are seeing newer means of education. We can say it's been on online learning platforms. How was education affected?
Well, it is definitely has caused the largest ever disruption in the life of students, educators, but also parents. If you think that they are becoming a major, part of the education system of our kids, and it's really resulting in an unprecedented loss of learning. I just want to recall that the Secretary General of the United Nations has warned that this pandemic has put really a generation at risk of what he called a learning catastrophe. So until very recently, the pandemic has resulted in school, of course, of all education institutions, from school, university, and other learning institutions, and has interrupted the learning program and affected the lives of 1.6 billion students in over 190 countries. This is an enormous mass of people that have been affected.
Of course, yes.
100 million teachers and educators have been affected, because also they need the skills to be upgraded in order to meet a different demand in learning and teaching through the remote learning. So we had also a whole class of teachers and educators that were not ready. And we had especially systems that were not ready to mitigate this risk. Nobody was expecting that. So that's why we still have, on a global record, 39 countries as we speak that didn't open schools yet.
Yes.
We have a lot on blending system, and some countries that are fully open. Of course, we have to keep also into consideration that half of the world, half of the hemisphere, at the present are on semester break.
Yes, hopefully everything goes back to normal with education, because you did mention in the beginning that when it comes to schools for children, it's not just the education. They need to have a connection with other students.
Absolutely. This is very important for the mental well-being of our kids. It's already very difficult to maintain attention and in front of a computer and follow, all online exercises and so on. If you think for very early primary school kids, I mean, the interaction in front of with the screen is not easy, because especially in the early years, you need this connection with your tutor, with your teachers that accompany you, but also be in an environment with your peers, where you can exchange. As well before, it's not only about transmitting knowledge, but it's also about all that set of skills that you get while you go on schools, confronting with your peers, confronting with your teacher and other, in another environment, or getting in contact with different environments. So yes, this is something that can be replaced, only when we go back normal to school.
Of course.
But it's a long way to go, because we don't know what is the pandemic reserving to us. But I should say that we have learned immensely in these 11 months. We have created, for example, as UNESCO, a global education coalition of 160 partners, and not only UN agencies, but private partners like Vodafone, Ericsson, or so on, or international institutions like Oxfam or WorldSkills, just to mention some, to say that this is not the UN, it's not only the government, but all the partners have really to come together, because we are all pieces that we fit together. For example, you mentioned learning distance, and we need access to internet. We need a computer. We need to equip every family with this tool.
That's right.
And in country like Kuwait, we are lucky. In this part of the world, we are lucky because, we don't leave anybody behind. But there are parts of the world where this is completely have been completely disrupted.
Because some households might have just 1 or 2 computers, and that might not be enough for the amount of children that actually need the computers to go to class, I guess.
Absolutely. In one household, for example, we can say that, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, 4 out of 5 learners do not have access to the internet.
Of course.
Imagine. And even if we talk about Western Europe or North America, at least 1 in 7 do not have access to internet at home. So these are things to be considered. So that's why this global coalition put all these providers together, and especially platform where you can have open access to different learning tools and materials, so that the teacher can use, that the parents also can use and access in a free way. This is also very important. So yes, it is. It might be a really, as we go, a learning catastrophe in the long term, but also it's a huge lesson learned. I think that the world will not be left unprepared. I think a lot has to deal with building up resilient system, risk management system. So to forecast these things, at least to be ready when things of this kind.
And I think that's why, Dr. Anna, this year it's really important to focus on this global event, as we actually do need it, and education has been really disrupted. So, Doctor, what are the main 3 segments for this year's global event?
Well, the global event will be tomorrow, and of course will be online, like most of the things that we are doing. There will be 3 major parts of this event, and we will have a range of people from all over the world. Our UN Secretary General will be presenting, of course, our Director General. But the 3 pillars are learning heroes. I mean, really, we had the heroes during this year that invented through innovation and so on, how to move forward and how to continue education. So we would really listen to them, how they innovated, and especially in countries where they are poor, and they really had to think and to come with innovative idea. And then one part important will be financing, because education is a public good, and we need financing for education. So, of course, this goes to the government, but in many countries it goes also to other international organizations and other NGO and so on to complement what they cannot do. And then innovation. Innovation. I think we have to go away from the traditional way of teaching and see what we can bring different. What did we learn out of it, and how we can build out of this more resilient systems?
Of course, because especially now we do need innovation. Just as a final question, how important is education in elevating the society? Can it help reducing the number of hunger, make people's lives live in dignity and reach equality and reduce violence in some way? Can we just mention that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, as I said, education is a public good. Is the pillar of the fourth goal in the Sustainable Development Goal. It also spans across other development goals. If you think, gender, for example, of course, opening education and making sure during this pandemic that girls, especially in certain unprivileged situations, continue to access. This is very important. Education gives us the tool. Of course, when we talk about sustainable development, climate change, and all these things, I mean, to continue our scientific research, we have never more than during this period how much scientific research is important, and we have seen what the world could do, in researching on the COVID and researching on the vaccine and so on.
That's right.
And this is all based on education, the level and the quality of education that we are able to give to the kids.
Yes.
Of course, we will have a disrupted generation because we have seen already how many months or weeks of school they lag behind because of closure, intermediate closure, and so on.
Yes, it's so sad. They have missed so much. But as you said, education is really important. Without it, we couldn't have had a vaccine come out within 1 year, which is such a big deal and needs to be credited to education. Doctor, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for all the information you gave us.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. It was our
evening.
pleasure. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
We had with us UNESCO representative in the Arab state of the Gulf and Yemen and director of UNESCO Doha office, Dr. Paolini. And now, dear viewers, we're going to be viewing a report on Health Organization strategic preparedness and response to plan the COVID-19.
WHO supports countries respond to COVID-19, sending supplies and protective personal equipment to over 150 countries, helping establish treatment centres and strengthening laboratory, treatment and biomedical capacity, providing diagnostics and biomedical equipment, issuing over 100 technical guidance documents to provide real-time information and best practices. WHO coordinates COVID-19 response, working with world leaders to keep everyone safe, deploying emergency medical teams to help design fit-for-purpose strategies, building the Partners Platform and identifying gaps to ensure an appropriate COVID-19 response, working with multiple agencies, NGOs, member states and the private sector. WHO accelerates COVID-19 research and development, convening the ACT Accelerator for coordinated research for treatment and vaccines, engaging in solidarity trials for therapeutics and vaccine research with over 5,000 people in over 100 countries, establishing the CTAP Access Pool, sharing research knowledge and working for accessible intellectual property for existing and new COVID-19 tools. WHO fights COVID misinformation, raising awareness and stopping the spread of COVID-19 misleading or false information and messages that promote harmful practices, holding technical webinars for experts, offering multilingual COVID-19 online courses through Open WHO and the WHO Academy app.
In areas where COVID-19 is widespread and physical distance cannot be maintained, masks can help stop the spread of COVID-19. Here's what to know about children and masks. Those under the age of 5 don't need to wear a mask, because they are less likely to be able to wear it properly. However, there may be local requirements or times when a mask is necessary, such as when the child is sick. Children 6 to 11 years old can wear a mask when recommended. Make sure they can wear it safely and there is adequate adult supervision. The use of masks for children 12 and over should follow the same guidance as adults when they cannot guarantee at least a 1 meter distance from others. For children with developmental disorders or disabilities, masks should not be mandatory and assessed on a case-by-case basis. Children with underlying health issues such as cystic fibrosis or cancer should wear a medical mask for protection. Children in general good health should wear a fabric mask when they cannot be at least 1 meter away from others. Before putting on the mask, children should clean their hands at least 20 seconds if using an alcohol-based hand rub, or at least 40 seconds if using soap and water. Make sure the mask is the right size to cover the nose, mouth and chin. Children should not touch the front of the mask, pull it under the chin or into the mouth, and definitely not share it. After taking off their mask, they should store it in a bag or container and clean their hands. With these simple tips and good supervision, children can stay safe while wearing their masks and still have fun with their friends.
Dear viewers, just like COVID-19 managed to affect our careers and lifestyles, it has also put strains on married couples and also altered the dynamics of many relationships. Our next guest will be giving us a professional opinion on this topic. We have been joined by clinical psychologist Dr. Juliet Dinka. Good evening, Dr. Juliet.
Hi, how are you?
Great, thank you. We've missed having you here in the studio.
I truly miss being there myself, and thank you so much for inviting me today to talk about this wonderful topic.
Yes, thank you for being with us. So, of course, with Corona, so much has changed. A lot of issues have been coming up. So, as a clinical psychologist, how did the COVID-19 pandemic affect married couples? I think that's such a big deal to be talking about right now.
It's true, and I think it has affected the dynamic between the couples. It has forced them into being together, limited space, being able to try to find some sort of like pattern with each other. You know, when you're married and then you have your own space and then you have your own friends and then you got your own routine and activities. And then suddenly we weren't prepared for this, and suddenly now we're required to, especially during the quarantine time where you're required to stay together, where your activities are very limited.
Of course.
And you have to now develop a new pattern of communication.
Because before, you know, you'd go to work, you'd see your friends, run errands, and then come back home to your husband or wife. So there was, as you said, there was space, so you wouldn't spend the entire day together. So why do you think all the negative attitude between the couples come out during the lockdown?
I mean, I'm not sure if it's just because they had problems and they used, you know, their daily routine to be able to escape. Not everyone was having a problem. So if you had a good marriage and you had a good partner and really enjoyed spending time, this was really a blessing for some people for COVID. But for those individuals that already were having marital problems or they weren't communicating, they were using their jobs or their friends and other distractions from their problem, those are the people that actually have been suffering, because now suddenly you are facing each other. The typical things that were bothering you with this person that you're living with, suddenly now you can't distract yourself with your job. I mean, you can only do so many Zooms or distract yourself with some activities, social media. But when, you know, when you've used all these other things to distract you, and now you're like, have to face it, we're starting to get to each other's nerves, and we can't communicate because you never really learned to communicate.
Of course.
I think that's what really surfaced it. So I'm not sure if these problems weren't there. I think most couples would agree that they probably had a bad marriage, but now that they were together, no space, no boundaries, where they have to answer to each other, and also each person is already feeling anxious because of the ambivalence and the unpredictability of COVID-19. What is this going to do to the future? And if you have kids, also that impacts the responsibility. So I'm sure that's going to cause a lot of resentment.
Especially in the beginning of 2020, we didn't really know what's going on. It was really stressful, and on top of that, having to lose our entire routine. It makes sense if actual issues in the marriage do surface and become really clear. So, doctor, in your opinion, how stressful is it for couples to live a normal life within the COVID-19 era and the lockdowns, of course?
I think that it's we have to get used to this is the way it is. I mean, I feel like a lot of times people are still waiting for the norm. Now, maybe the normalcy will come back later, but right now I think what most people need to do is to really accept that this is the way things are, that there are going to be limitations until everyone is vaccinated, and that we need to be able to adapt to a new routine. So couples need to start adapting that they have. Maybe there were some issues in their marriage that they need to address. Maybe they need to go to couple therapy or discuss their problems. They need to start to figure out that this have impacted them maybe financially, or it's impacted their social system or support. They've impacted the way their kids were, or the family in general. So I feel like instead of waiting for you to understand, well, wait till we go to normal and this is what we're going to do. I think that we need to adapt to this, give each other some space, and try to make the best that we can. Like, have, dinner time together, or date time, or go out together. Try to communicate. I don't want people to go back to the way it used to be. I'm not sure if the way that used to be was healthy either. I think, there are some good things about this, that they are going to force us to be able to deal with each other a little bit better, I think.
Of course, hopefully things do get back to normal, but in a better and different way, where couples are actually communicating. So, Dr. Dinka, at the end, what advice would you give our audience for today?
For couples, I think what I would advise, I know that, and somebody was also saying that there are like an increase in couples' problems, or people, like you see it in social media, that maybe divorce rates have increased. I'm not sure about that. I didn't do the statistic myself, but I think people need to understand that we're all impacted. We're very anxious, and that decisions should not be made right now. Things are not normal. There's a lot of unpredictability. And I always tell my patients, look, whenever you're stressed, whenever you're anxious, whenever things are not typical, I don't think decisions like separating or, making these big decisions about businesses or decision about, the family in general should be decided right now. I think people need to give time for each other. If they need to give space for each other, they need to really think about what is it that they don't like about each other. I also think transparency. I mean, I feel like 2020 people were forced to stay together, and they were not used to being honest. So maybe now we've learned a lesson. Maybe we need to address what is uncomfortable.
Yes, it's really important to speak up. And as you said, communication is key in this issue. Dr. Juliet, thank you so much for all the information and, of course, the valuable advice you gave our viewers today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and have a great evening.
Thanks, you too. Dear viewers, we had with us the clinical psychologist Dr. Juliet Dinka, and now we're going to be viewing a report on Kuwait's heritage. Stay tuned.
Sadu weaving, the pace of a camel in a fast-moving culture, This statement characterizes the unique position of this textile within Kuwait. The slow process of weaving and the value of the handmade is at odds with the consumer-driven, technology-valuing culture that many of us live in today. Weaving is one of the oldest forms of textiles. The earliest weavings found date back to 7000 BCE. In its simplest form, it is the joining of the warp and weft to create a cloth. This cloth was and is an important part of many cultures, created to be functional, while also carrying messages of culture and society through its purpose. The colors and symbols found on the cloth, as well as the value placed on it. Within the deserts of Kuwait, the nomadic Bedouin have been creating Sedu woven cloth for centuries. The word Sedu references the extension of the hand, the slow pace of a camel. It is a word used for the woven cloth and the loom it is created on. The original function of Sedu cloth was as tents, utilitarian objects such as camel bags, pillows, tent dividers, and many other types of family furnishings woven to support the nomadic life of the Bedouin. This form of pastoral nomadism meant that you had to be able to transport your entire life, including your house on the back of your livestock. Each element of daily life was carefully designed.
Welcome back to the studios of Hala Kuwait. Dear viewers, we have reached the end of tonight's episode. I hope you enjoyed the interview segments that majorly focused on education and, of course, a psychologist's advice on overcoming COVID-19 stress, as well as our various reports that always aim to keep you updated on everything happening here in Kuwait. Till we see you next time, have a wonderful evening and stay safe.